Welcome back and thank you for joining me. On Wednesday, the Scottish Government published the first draft of the Victims, Witnesses and Justice Reform Bill, Scotland. It's going to scrap the not proven verdict, reduce the size of criminal juries from 15 to 12 and create a new specialist sexual offences court. But listen to this, the plans are controversial because these sweeping reforms will also create the role of Victims and Witness Commissioner, require the majority needed for a guilty verdict to be 2/3, and allow ministers to carry out a pilot of rape trials conducted by a single judge, no jury. It is a really, really big move, and I don't know if you even read about that, because it's been buried in a lot of things. But, you know, where Scotland trials things out, we can't rule out, if they think it's a good idea and decide to go ahead, you can't rule out that happening in England, Wales, and the rest of Britain. So there's only one person to talk to about this, Joseph Kotrie Monson, lawyer, broadcaster, all-around brilliant legal mind. Joseph, there seems to be, okay, I had a good old Google about this. Some countries like France and New Zealand have already gone kind of this way. It's been pointed out that 80% of criminal trials in Scotland are currently conducted without a jury. The arguments given about having no jury when it comes to a rape trial, they're saying that, well, you know what, the juries go in, they have all of these myths and all of these sort of beliefs about the person making the accusation. So if we don't have juries, we won't have that. Just a single judge. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I have to say alarming, and I'm not the only one, because the criminal defence lawyers across Scotland, Trisha, are boycotting these courts, saying that they will not take part in something that abolishes what they see to be the sacrosanct right of an accused person to a jury trial. Now, you're right. It has been said 80% of cases, criminal cases, are already dealt with in the lower courts without a jury. They're motoring offences. They're very... And most cases that go through our courts are, in fact, motoring offences. The overwhelming majority, and probably most people will be able to identify with that, because it's not so rare to have a speeding ticket, is it? But to be accused of a serious offence like that, obviously that's a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and people should be entitled to a jury trial. To start talking, as some commentators have as well, about the French or the Italian or the German systems, well, that's a real red herring, I'm afraid to say. And the reason for that is this: they do not have what we call an adversarial system, prosecution going against the defence, judge and jury in the middle deciding. They have an inquisitorial system where the prosecutor, as the magistrate or the judges, they are trained professional judges who inquire as to evidence and actively investigate, and that's their safeguard in respect of defendants. I am really concerned about this, and other lawyers are too, for this reason, Trisha. This is political. This is about the government who sees that there are these shocking results in rape cases where very, very few people are convicted. And they're thinking, what is it we can do to get the media off our back? What is it we can do to make people think that we are doing our best to address this incredibly important women's rights issue? And instead of looking at the challenges, like, well, for example, you could be nice to complainants, you could give them more time with police officers, you could actually engage with them, you could, and the police do a good job on it.
Reform parts of the CPS.
Yeah, well, you've heard me on that, of course, a few times, Trisha. But the problem is this, that, and it's one that you can't completely solve. Trisha, sex is generally a private thing, and it means that these are one witness for the prosecution cases with no corroboration. Now, don't get me wrong, where there are injuries or somebody's talked about, someone's given a confession, for example, in a text message, as sometimes happens. Well, in those circumstances, you can get a conviction. But when it's innocent until proven guilty and beyond reasonable doubt, you won't fix that problem. But the politicians know that judges, once the spotlight is on them, rather than crucially, the anonymous jury who will not be criticised, judges will inevitably know that they are subject to press scrutiny in these cases, and whether subconsciously or on purpose, will be more willing to convict. So goes the theory than a jury. And I have to say, it's one with which I have some sympathy at that theory. And the reason for that is this. In magistrates' court already, we talked about those motoring offences, didn't we? Conviction rates for the last 30 years have been 10 or 15%, depending on which year, higher in the magistrates' court where there are no juries than the Crown Court. I think when you're accused of something you could go to life for, you're entitled to a jury that you don't pick, but a jury of your peers to hear all of the evidence and pronounce the verdict.
So some of the victims groups and victim support groups in rape trials and what have you, there seems to be a lot of discussion from them. They seem to be more behind this. But I was just thinking, how do we know where a judge lies on this? You know, they're assuming, you know, everything that you say, but how do we know where a judge is? I mean, a judge could believe all of those furphies and those things.
We don't.
Women are fast and loose, and you know, what have you.
Well, I think judges. Yeah, I think lots has been done to readjust the in popular culture and in conversations in the media, in Parliament, and in courts, in the legal system, to educate people about the sensitivities around rape, to take the stigma out of being a victim, you know, because it wasn't so long ago in our history in the 20th century where victims were nevertheless shamed by the allegation. I think we see less of that now. It's something, of course, we should always be vigilant about. To start suggesting that juries don't know what they're talking about because they believe the press nonsense about victim blaming or whatever else, I just don't buy it. The jury system is so good, Trisha, because you actually get a balanced group of people with life experience, and to denigrate them when it suits you because you're trying to, at any costs, get the rape conviction rates up. You know, the problem is, you know, that must be wrong. And the problem is, if the goal is the statistics alone rather than the quality of the decision, what do you end up with? You end up with more people getting convicted, but you end up with a dumbed down version of getting to the truth and a serious risk of miscarriages of justice.
So, would it be safe to say it's the people who are accused of rape who are in the most precarious situation here?
Well, I think that it's, you know, and let's just play it straight. Let's talk, you know, let's just talk about, you know, the reality is that anybody is encouraged, if they feel aggrieved, to make an allegation, and pointing a finger if it's not true is easier than if it is. And we should never ignore the existence of malicious complaints. We should be seeking to have a justice system that protects against that with a rigorous process. And that means, yes, that rape complainants will be cross-examined, and the defendant is entitled to it. Once you start taking away these measures that protect us and in society from miscarriages of justice, yes, it will affect defendants. It will actually affect the innocent and the guilty. But the fact that it affects the innocent detrimentally is something we should be very, very careful. You can't unring that bell once you're risking convicting an innocent man or an innocent woman.
I think it's an interesting point that you make, and I'm sure that most people don't realise, because I, like many people, you know, when you, as I said before, when you Google and you see that New Zealand and France and those and Germany, as you mentioned, already have juryless courts, but their judges are actually trained. I don't think, I mean, that doesn't come out anywhere in the literature that I had a look at, that the judges are actually trained in those countries. They actually...
It's not a comparable system. Their processes are fair, but they go through a very different process. You have to decide early in your career whether you want to be a lawyer or a judge. You don't have ex-lawyers after 20 or 30 years becoming judges like in the UK. In fact, statistically, in the senior courts, Crown Court, etc., judges are typically drawn from the prosecutorial ranks. So, and which may account for some of that distinction between jury trials and judge-only trials in the magistrates' court in terms of conviction rates. But to talk about, well, France does it this way, I have to say, every time a politician tries to cherry pick a fact out of context from another European culture to prove a point over here when it's not comparable, it makes me cringe a little bit, I have to say, Trisha.
Absolutely. And let's just talk about, while we're talking about this, and as I said before, if Scotland is trialling it, is there a danger that they might see it as quote unquote successful purely in numbers and say, well, hang on, let's roll it out to the rest of Britain?
And this is what happens. You get the numbers up. People are then in prison convicted. It's very hard to go to the Court of Appeal. It's not like America where you've got a decent shot at least a first appeal. In the UK, you have to show your case has merit before you even get there. And if you're either on legal aid, so you can't get legal aid for an appeal because legal aid basically doesn't apply for appeals in this country's funding, certainly in England and Wales, or alternatively, you may have paid privately the first time around and it's wiped you out. We're talking remortgaging your house money to be represented by a solicitor and a barrister properly in these types of cases. And I just find it really alarming because those figures will probably go up. People will say they'll be patting themselves on the back, just like you say, Trisha. And of course, the person who's wrongfully convicted, who will not be everybody, but will definitely be some, that person will be in prison without a voice and without a hope.
Wow. That's very, very scary, isn't it? So, I mean, but there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it. This trial's going to go ahead, and that's it. Unless, as you say, lawyers and solicitors and people like yourself refuse to get involved with it.
Yeah, it's our legal system.
What's that going to mean, Joseph? What's that going to mean if they refuse to be involved in it?
You can't have a rape trial. You can't have a rape trial without lawyers. It would be a fun day at the Court of Appeal if somebody was convicted in those circumstances. Our legal system requires the approval and the ongoing cooperation and goodwill of the people who work within it. One of the reasons that the death penalty, for example, is unlikely to return is that people in the legal profession and judges, they do not want to defend, prosecute, and to be the sentencer in those types of cases. So, unless they've got the lawyers to buy in, and there's no way they'll get it in Scotland, there's no way they'll get it in England. Even the defence lawyers, I'm sorry to the government, but you need our help if you want to pass these types of changes, and you're not going to get it.
Wow. Watch this space. Joseph, thank you so much for that. It is concerning, isn't it? Because you think first these kinds of trials and then what else? Joseph Kotrie Monson there talking about the trial that Scotland is doing with having rape cases, although they're saying they're going to go ahead, having rape cases where there is no jury, just the judge. Stay with us. A lot more to come on the show.